You join me here this morning on this wonderful little pit with this beautiful common. What I'm doing is a bit of a spring trick that I'm trying to show you. A little bit of a bait hack that I think you'll like, that certainly worked for me this morning, works for me most spring into early summer. So I'll get this baby back and then we'll have a look at how I caught it. Okay, so you join me today on this lovely little pit in Shropshire, little clear water pit with some really nice looking commons and mirrors, you know, got that dark, that real oaky colour to them because of the clear water, and great place to come and try and catch one out the edge, which is what I'm doing this week. I'm looking for spots to fish on, spots where fish have cleaned them off, and then I'm using something really different as bait. So as you can see here, lots of different bits and pieces, lots of different makes, and that's exactly what it is, salt. So what we'll do is we'll take a look through and we'll have a look at the different ways I'm using this, especially at this time of year and especially on waters like this, little clear waters where I can see where the fish have been feeding, and I use salt to get us that bite. Okay, so I touched on earlier that I was using salt, and this was the bait that we were going to have a look at. It's not really a bait, you know, as such. It's not something you can hook. So I'm going to try and tell you how I'm fishing it, why I'm fishing it, and how I present it. I found the best way to mix it is with some small, I'm using small Sonu halibut pellets. I think they go perfectly with it. I don't want a lot of flavour with this bait. I don't want a lot of bait flavour. I don't want crushed up boilies. I don't want things like that. All I want is just a salty, slightly fishy taste. The way I'm fishing it is to put it in a PVA bag, little PVA bag like that, and just fish that on what I said before, these clear patches. So I'll take you back to a session I had recently where we were on a very difficult water. I was with some very good anglers, you know, some friends of mine, and it was really tough. We'd fished it for the best part of 2 days without a touch really, and what we'd observed was it's very clear and you could see the fish coming in, and there's lots of clear patches where they've been sucking on the bottom and they clean off the silt and leave these golden, like sandy areas. And you can see these as you go around when the sun's up with a pair of Polaroids on. You can look in the water and you can see where these areas are. Now, we could observe fish feeding on these, or what we thought was feeding, really quite hard. You know, they were on them most of the day. As soon as the water started to warm up and the sun was out, that you could see them coming in over these patches. And these are some really tricky to catch sort of fish that, you know, history fish. And Tench, Carp, they were all at it, all doing the same thing. And when we were watching them, we couldn't work out what was going on. Every time we tried to put bait on one of these patches, they'd come in, and the minute they sensed there was bait on the patch, they'd leave and go to another one. So after about, you know, like I say, after a couple of days of watching this and not being able to unlock the key really, one of my friends suggested that they might be after minerals. Now, we've all used salt at certain times of year, but never to the extent of this. But we basically, one of these bags, we tied up one of these bags and put it, and I'll go through the hook bait later on, but we put it with a little inert hook bait and literally placed it, as the fish left the patch, placed it on the patch. You could see it in the margin, clear as day, dropped the line down, nice, and put it on the buzzer, walked a few feet away, was standing there discussing whether the fish were going to come back on, you know, if it was salt they were after, and the rod was away. Well, long story short, over the next 24 hours, we had more takes on there in one 24-hour period than you'd expect to have in a week of good anglers, because it's a week venue where you book it for a week, or in the winter when you've got guys who are in the syndicate, a good winter's fishing wouldn't even produce you with as many takes as we had in 24 hours. So it was quite clear that the fish were after salt. So that's what we're doing today. That's what I'm trying to show you, is how to, if the fish are very difficult, and like, you know, some of us turn to a zig and other things and floaters, we're not doing that. We're actually trying to tempt the fish down onto those little cleaned up areas where they're don't ask me why they're after salt. I don't know. I'm not a fish biologist. I'm sure there's people who could tell me. But for some reason, at this time of year, spring, early summer, especially as they come up to spawn and just after, they tend to be digging around in those areas where they're after some form of salt or mineral. So we'll take a look at a few more ways we use this. Okay, so I've talked about how I'm presenting the salt and why we're doing it. And to be honest, we've found no difference in using sea salt to rock salt to just bog standard cheap table salt. But different ones lend themselves to different situations. The rock salt, be it like the Himalaya pink one's a great one to use. You can see it there, or the sea salt. But the coarse one is far better to put into a bag and to actually use, or to use with a method feeder, something we'll look at in a bit. It's far better, like, and it's far easier to mix with the pellet and to make it as, you know, so presentable, so you can actually get that out and have it around the hook bait. What we found with if you're soaking any, because you can soak particles in salt, like I say, you can mix it with the pellet. We can use it in the method. There's a few different ways we've used it to great effect, but we also you know, marinate our hook baits in it. So I'll talk a bit more about hook baits in a minute, because there's something that I've found that's really quite it really makes a difference what hook bait you use, you know. But the real fine table salt, now that is great for putting on your hook baits, because it's nice and fine. You can put it in a bag or a tub with it, and it gets absorbed really easily, whereas the rock salt tends to, you know, it tends to take a while just to soak into the bait, or to, you know, to impart that flavour, that real salty taste into it. Okay, so touching on the hook baits that we're using now, with this method, with using the salt, the best thing I've found is if you use a very inert hook bait, so you want a hook bait without much flavour and smell, this is no place for your bright, highly flavoured pop-up or wafter or bottom bait. You know, what we're trying to use is something that doesn't really give off that much flavour. So what I've found to be the best is some tiger nuts, mostly I've chopped in half, and I actually put just the normal table salt on that. So steep them in the table salt, so your tigers are actually really, really salty, really salty. But what it does, it matches what you've got on the bottom. It's not giving off that signal that it's something different, so, you know, the fish can identify the hook bait as dangerous. But so another point when putting salt on your hook baits, by its very nature, salt, I'll show you it's tipping it. There, you can see the moisture coming out. Now I've put no liquid in that. That's just what the salt's drawing out of the tiger nuts. So when you do steep your baits in salt, what will happen is your baits become very small and very firm. Something we can use to our advantage, and I'll show you another bait that I'll use in a different situation than where we use salt. We'll do that, cover that one in a bit. But for nuts, don't do too many and leave them for too long. So a month, 6 weeks with a handful of nuts, you know, and once you finish using them, that's pretty much, I'll just chop them up and then put them in the bait and then start a new batch. Okay, so that's the tiger nut, and A great bait, brilliant if you've got lots of other species as well, because they withstand a lot of grief. Now another bait that's really good, and I've got one actually mounted on the rig I'm using here today, is, as you can see that, and basically that are those cheap peanuts. Lovely, really tasty, extremely salty. So 2 halves of salted peanut, a little bit softer. They go, don't worry about fish safety, these are fine for fish. Don't feed loads. All we use them for is a hook bait. We don't even put any freebies in the bags. So it's just a bag of salt with 2 halves of salted peanut and a little slither of cork in the centre, and it just causes those nuts to sit up above that hook and sit in amongst that salt. And that really is a killer. The other one I've used to good effect is a pelleteau. So simply one of Sonyu's 8mm pelleteaus, easy, pop it on the hair. Great if you're fishing this method, you know, with the method or something you know you're refreshing regularly, but not so good if you're leaving, you know, for a long period of time on the bottom, i.e. carp fishing or going for your specimen tench or bream. You know, then I prefer the nut because the bait lasts on the bottom longer. But if you're casting out pretty quick and you're doing it on a method, that's another great hook bait to use with this. So basically, any hook bait that matches it is salty and hasn't got a lot of Okay, I talked about the method as well, and another way of presenting salt, and it's one we found quite good. So I'm using some hemp and halley. Sonya Bait's wonderful hemp and halley, nothing more than that. As I said before, I'm not wanting to introduce a lot of flavours into this mix. All I've put in that is simply some of the rock salt, as you can see, a few crystals. But then just before casting, what I am doing is taking that mix, that real salty mix, and just pressing a bit on. So as I cast out, I've got that very salt encrusted bomb with extra salt in the method. And that's also been a really, really effective way of presenting a salty bait on a small patch. Okay, another wonderful common at this lovely little pit. And once again, little bags, fish down the margin with our salty mix on those little clear spots. I'll just say it one more time. If you're going to try this method, and please do, this time of year it's great, just try and find those clear spots. We didn't catch any tench today or any bream. Normally, you know, everything comes to the party when you're using this method, but still, who can moan with a few carp like this? Great days fishing.